secrets they keep. Who knew the South could hold such lore? Wicked tales on every floor. Sweet home Alabama, not so sweet no more. History's a wild one, crime galore. Through the hills and the haunted pines, truth gets twisted in the lines.
I've been here with Country Diggers. Welcome to my speakeasy. And today we will be going into Wicked North Alabama by Jacquelyn Procter Reeves. And today we will be talking about Pure as the Driven Slush, Alabama's Tallulah Bankhead. So stay tuned. All right, Tallulah Bankhead. The people of Alabama practically demanded that the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind go to Huntsville native Tallulah Bankhead. She was a bona fide movie star, and most importantly, a Southern girl. But misbehavior was her oxygen, and her reputation, even by Hollywood standards, was downright legendary. Tallulah had few, if any, inhibitions. The story was told that she was intently listening to Eleanor Roosevelt while the two visited in proximity of a bathroom. Not bothering to excuse herself or close the door, she simply dropped her drawers and sat on the toilet without interrupting the First Lady's conversation. Perhaps she had a reason to crave attention. Tallulah Brockman Bankhead was born on January 31st, 1902, to a ravishing beauty, Adeline Eugenie Bankhead, in Huntsville, Alabama. Her mother died from blood poisoning as a result of childbirth complications a few weeks later. Adeline's mother had died the same way. Adeline was from a prominent Mississippi family and was engaged to Mary. While visiting one of her bridesmaids in Huntsville, she met attorney William Bankhead. It was love at first sight. Adeline's engagement was called off and she married Bankhead instead. William Bankhead and his family were steeped in Southern politics, Democrats to the bone. William served as Speaker of the House. Her uncle, John H. Bankhead II, and her grandfather, John H. Bankhead, were both senators. At first, fate seemed to smile on Will and Adeline Bankhead. Daughter Eugenie was born, followed a year later by Tallulah, who was named for her grandmother. According to legend, Tallulah's grandmother was conceived while her parents were staying at Tallulah Falls in Georgia. After bearing two daughters, the radiant wife of Will Bankhead was dead, leaving him emotionally devastated and in a downward spiral. Tallulah and her sister Eugenie were taken to Jasper, Alabama, where their grandparents lived. For the rest of their youth, they were raised alternatively in Jasper and in Washington, D.C., and by various parental relatives, an aunt, their grandparents, and occasionally even their father. Bankhead remarried a few years later and once caught young Tallulah mimicking her stepmother. He told her the only place for that behavior was on the theater stage. So began her acting career. At age 15, Tallulah pestered her grandmother to let her submit a photograph to a movie magazine for a beauty contest. Her photograph was chosen among the finalists, but she had failed to send in her name and address. She was not an attractive child, and members of her family hoped that perhaps a rejection from the magazine would clear her head. The plan backfired, and when she made up her mind to try the theater in New York, her aunt agreed to be her chaperone. Tallulah eventually made her way to the London stage, where she was a sensation for a number of years. Her outrageous lifestyle was already drawing attention. She was investigated for corruption of several Eton schoolboys by engaging them in indecent and unnatural sex acts. Charges were never brought against her. Tallulah once turned cartwheels at a party, sans underwear, no underwear. She welcomed her guest at the door during one of her parties with her ever-present cigarette holder in her hand, but no clothing. A startled guest was surprised to see that everyone carried on around her as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. One of her very straight-laced elderly friends commented to an unhinged guest, "I don't know why Tallulah goes around naked. She has so many pretty frocks." Tallulah insisted on punctuality when guests were invited to her home, yet she once forgave a male guest for being hours late because he brought her flowers he had decorated by hand. It seems that the man brought tulips and then decided that some needed stripes and others needed polka dots. He applied the stripes and polka dots with paint and then waited for them to dry before showing up at Tallulah's home. Tallulah bought herself a Bentley, even though she had not yet learned to drive. Her sense of direction was worse than her driving, however, and she would call a taxi to lead the way from one point to another while she followed behind. Sounds kind of like me with the directions. Away from the prying eyes of her strict Southern family, Tallulah drank to excess, had sex to excess, and took drugs. When she went on days-long drinking binges, she would not eat food, and when it came to sex, she slept with men and women. Her promiscuity finally caught up with her. After several abortions before the age of 30, she nearly died from advanced venereal disease. See what a immoral lifestyle can get you. But which necessitated an emergency hysterectomy. So her venereal disease had gotten so bad that she had to have a hysterectomy. Tallulah was one of the many actresses who wanted desperately to snag the role of Scarlett O'Hara, based on the nation's best-selling book Gone with the Wind. Tallulah excelled in her screen test, but because she was 36 years old, all were concerned that she would not pass for the very young Scarlett in the beginning barbecue scene. It was the right part, but the wrong time. When Tallulah heard that young Shirley Temple was filmed through gauze, she said, "I should be filmed through aluminum." Okay. Tallulah never forgot her Alabama roots, though she didn't get home very often. In 1937, she flew home with fellow actor John Emery. They were married at the Bankhead home known as Sunset, while crowds of fans waited outside the gates to get a glimpse of the stars. There were problems in the marriage early on. However, Her career eclipsed his, and their time spent apart exceeded their time together. No one was surprised when it ended. Although the marriage was long over, it was legally ended after 4 years. Sources differ regarding Tallulah's feelings about her mother's premature death. Some say that she felt guilty and visited her mother's grave only once, while other sources say that although she would always wonder about her mother, she did not blame herself. One interesting story, though, unauthenticated, bears repeating. Tallulah attended a seance in Hollywood, and in the course of the evening, she was visited by her mother's ghost through a spiritual advisor. Tallulah was asked to realign her mother's headstone at Huntsville's Maple Hill Cemetery. Some days or weeks later, Tallulah called a family friend in Huntsville to look into the status of the headstone. As it turned out, the small obelisk was askew over the square base. Tallulah was unnerved by the news and did not participate in another seance. Tallulah's father died after months of poor health in the early fall of 1940. Although he had long since remarried, since the death of his first wife, everyone, including his second wife, knew that the love of his life was buried in Huntsville's Maple Hill Cemetery. He had agreed, however, that when the time came, he would be buried in Jasper instead of Huntsville. Adeline Eugenie Bankhead remains buried alone at Maple Hill, with not a single member of her family nearby. Over the years, Tallulah became increasingly difficult for others to work with. She was a loose cannon and a difficult diva. She suffered from insecurities about her acting ability, perhaps because she never had formal acting lessons. Even so, she had a style that was emulated by many other actresses. She did not care to act in movies because they were filmed out of sequence. She didn't care to act in movies because they were filmed out of sequence. And she found it difficult to conjure emotions when at times she was speaking to no one. The theater was much more realistic. Tallulah took her last role for fun. In 1967, she played a very camp Black Widow in the Batman television series. But her health was already failing, and her exquisite beauty was gone. Bad habits fostered over her lifetime shortened her time on Earth. She smoked 100 cigarettes per day, drank and took illegal drugs, and she could not or would not take steps to help herself. Towards the end, she paid someone to hold her hand at night until she fell asleep. On December 12, 1968, legendary actress Tallulah Bankhead died in a New York City hospital of double pneumonia, complicated by chronic emphysema. It was worsened by malnutrition due to a prolonged drinking binge. According to several sources, her last words were codeine bourbon. Tallulah was buried at St. Paul's Church in Chestertown, Maryland, far from her Alabama home. It's a sad story, really, how a person can get that low, and she died holding the hand of someone she paid. But anyway, a little side note here. Disney based its version of Cruella De Ville on the personality and mannerisms of Tallulah Bankhead, and her long, lanky physical design came from Mary Wickes, who served as her live-action model. Well, hope y'all enjoyed Wicked North Alabama, and that was Tallulah Bankhead, and one of Alabama's most notorious actresses. All right, see you back soon.